Hello everyone. I was supposed to get this video out to you in October, but I didn't get to it, so better late than never. I'm bringing it to you in November. Today I have for you a layout process video inspired by the Hip Kit Club weekly challenge. Now you can access these challenges through their Facebook page, and you don't have to be a subscriber to their kits to do so. And you don't have to use their products to participate in their challenges. So for this challenge, I was inspired by the circles and crepe texture of those pumpkins, by the rows of leaves in color order, and by the reflection of the houses in the water. So let me show you how I took the inspiration and put it to use on a layout. My story today is about how I love comfortable clothes, and I am using my Best of Both Worlds kit from the Chamel project for the month. And I am pulling out a bunch of supplies that have lots of good texture to go with this clothing inspired layout. And I am looking for colors that will work with all of these circles that I'm going to die cut out of various papers. And I'm going to use lots of different colors because, like I said, I was inspired by that row of leaves in color order. So I'm going to come up with a chunk of colors and align them all up in color order. So as my background for this layout, I am going to go with this very subtly printed cardstock piece. And then here is the die set I'm using. It's by Dynamics, and it's just concentric circles. And I'm going to cut out circles in a couple of different sizes. I think I end up using 2 different sizes, even though I think I cut out 3 different sizes. So just plenty of circles to give myself some flexibility in arranging everything. And I won't bore you with all the circle cuttings. So once I've got all of these pattern papers out, I start doing the reflection bit. When I place a circle up higher, I place the matching color circle down lower, and you can see that I've started doing some reflection left to right, and I will eventually ditch that idea. Now, as I'm working here, I realize that I don't quite have as many colors as I wanted, so I will go back and die cut some more circles. And then I am using some neutral patterns to span across all of my circles to kind of add some length visually to this layout. And here I am picking more pattern papers because I knew I wanted to add more in there. So I get more circles going, and here we go. Here's my stack with more colors on there. And like I said, I wanted to kind of keep them in color order, so I keep more yellows next to yellows, blues and greens next to blues and greens, and so forth. And I keep their reflections down lower. And I do stagger them a little bit to mimic the roof lines of the houses in that inspiration piece. And here's where I realized that my photos were facing off of the page, and I don't like that. So I turned my whole layout around and faced my photos inward, which means I had to rearrange all my circles. But now that they're all back in order, I was able to just quickly apply a couple of strips of adhesive down and stick everything down. And I got my neutral border pieces flowing across. And then I turned to these textural elements that I want. And at first I thought that I was going to use them as circle layers, but then I decided to go with them as parts to hold onto my title. So, and in my kit I did have a cork alphabet, and that's part of the reason why I included just plain cork sheets in here, so that I could cut the sheets into, use punches into shapes, or like I did here, my die cutter into just simple circles. And then that adds the texture that I wanted for this layout, or at least one of the textural elements that I wanted, because we are going to move on to this textural element. Now this is a sheet of a very sturdy crepe paper material, and I do not remember where I got it. If I can find any info on something similar, I will put it in the show notes. But I just used it here as a couple of ruffles over different parts of my layout. And here I am adding a third zone, because I always like to work in threes. Just that rule of 3 works very well for me. So I add some cork and a ruffle element to that zone. And then I've got 3 spots that make me happy. And then part of this kit this month was this copper heat embossing that I really wanted to play with, and it's another textural element that I'm adding to this layout. And my kit included a bunch of word phrases that have a lot to do with, hanging out and stuff. So I just picked and choose. I chose certain word phrases that would work for the story on this layout. Pardon my kitty, I know he's meowing a lot. So you did see me stamp those word phrases down with black ink, and then I used a little bit of a mask over them so that I could add a copper heat emboss border, and I wanted that border not to cover up any of the words. So the masking allows the border to go around the words without going over the top of the words. Now I'm going to slow this section down here a little bit. I am doing some stitching on my layout, and if you've never done stitching on your layout before, or much stitching at all, I'll just give you a quick look at how this works. So I did pre-poke holes in my layout, and I just kind of eyeballed it. But if you want to measure it out with a ruler, you can certainly do it that way. So you are going to use a needle, and I prefer to use something like a darning needle that tends to have a larger eye and a less sharp point, actually. And that makes it a little smoother when you're going through. And again, you'll have to pre-poke the holes because it doesn't have a sharp point. So I send my thread up through the back of my project to the front, and then I send it back down, and then in the third hole, I send it back up, but you will notice that that means that it doesn't cover part of the stitch. So this is called a back stitch, because when you do this kind of stitch, you're going to send your needle back to that hole that you already went through once before. And that will create a continuous line of your stitching. So now on the back, you skip over to that next hole, and then on the front, you go back to that previous stitch that you put in place. And you can see here's what it looks like in the back. I just taped down tails, and that gives me a continuous line of stitching. And then I add that continuous line of stitching all the way around the entire layout as well, just using really large stitches. With the base of my layout solid, I am ready to move to some embellishing, and I go through these cut apart sheets that I had put in my kit, and I'm looking for things that I think will work. I do like those phrase stickers down there, although the whole phrase isn't quite right for this layout, and I will cut those apart to just use the words that I want. And I know I want to add some more stamping and that copper heat embossing to this layout, but I'm not quite sure what I want yet. So I am doing a bit of a dry run here with my embellishments to see where I can put things, if the things that I chose are even going to work, because some of them I wasn't quite sure about. Now I know down in that bottom right corner I left some space because I'm going to put that pile of circles down there as a big spot for my journaling. And so that gap in the thread is there on purpose because I know it's just going to get covered up. So I just continue with my dry run until I am satisfied with the placement. And I realize the opportunity for more stamping comes in between these various elements because that background paper has gaps in it that feel a little too empty to me. So I am going to pull out more heat embossing, and we'll get to that. I set everything aside and started some of this heat embossing, and I'll give you one little run through of it if you've never done it before. I will use that sheet of paper to cover up areas that I don't want any ink to end up on. And once I've got it inked, I will put my embossing powder over the Versamark ink. You can use various sticky inks for this, and then give it a heat with my heat tool. And that adds a lot of fun texture that kind of helps fill in some space on the layout. With my heat embossing done, I tuck all of my embellishments back into my cluster zones on my page. I've got stickers and phrases that went into zones along with some cut aparts and my little label pieces that I created. Now you can see the texture I've got there with the stitching and the crepe paper and cork building up clusters, and I've got my journaling going on. And that is it for this one. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit of stitching and heat embossing, and that you'll try some of these techniques. I'll see you next time. I really appreciate you watching. If you got something helpful out of this video, please do give it a like. That helps my channel. And if you want to catch my future videos, please subscribe.